yet, but I realize some of you are connecting and making sure that your systems work. As normal, we will start with a few minutes of wittering on by me as I deal with the administrative matters, which will allow a few more people to sort out their electronics problems and connect, or indeed get their coffee made and come and get in front of the screen. So we'll be going live with the actual discussion in just a few seconds as we click through midday. And in fact, we have done that. So I can start with good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our next intelligence update session. As I think I mentioned in some of the adverts, we used to call them lunch and learns, but then realized that that was not very inclusive for our members that are on either of our coasts, and indeed some of our international members. So we've rebranded them a bit to be inclusive. This afternoon, I'm really pleased to be talking with Mayor Adrian Foster of Clarington, who is also the chair of the Canadian Association of Nuclear Host Communities. So he can talk more broadly about host communities across the country. I'm really pleased to be doing it because in the nuclear industry, we tend to be scientists and engineers, and we like talking about technology. And indeed, a lot of our sessions have been focused on technology. But as with every other industry, people and communities are very important to us as well. So getting a perspective from one of the communities that's affected by the nuclear industry, I think is going to be very valuable, and there'll be some very interesting things that we're going to learn from Mayor Foster, who has kindly said I can call him Adrian because he knows that I'm going to lapse into doing that anyway. I have been told numerous times by my CNS office that I have to remind everybody that this session is being recorded, and it is our intention, if everything goes well, that we will post it onto our website. So please be aware of that. And so now, having failed on the first two goes when I was reminded to do that, I actually have a 1 out of 3 record of reminding people of that. I also wanted to just say at this point that whilst this is going to be a conversation by myself and between myself and Adrian, I do want to answer your questions. So if you feed them to me in the chat, I will try and incorporate them into our conversation and get answers to the questions that you're asking. And if I look like I'm being shifty and my eyes are flicking all over the place, that's because I'm trying to listen to Adrian speak and read your questions at the same time. And this is going to be a sexist joke, but as a male, I'm only programmed to do one thing at a time. So that's a real challenge to my capabilities. So basically, one of the first things I normally do is do an introduction to my guest for the day. And I'm not going to do that on this occasion for 2 reasons. One is I completely forgot to ask Adrian to send me a bio, so I can't do an introduction. But the other is, as I said, this one's about people. And in fact, it is going to be a discussion and not a presentation. And so I thought it was really appropriate, given that I have forgotten anyway to get the bio, to ask Adrian to kick off by telling us a little bit about himself. And this to me is important because I do a lot of work on social media, and a lot of the people that are against nuclear power on social media try to make out that the leaders in the nuclear industry are some kind of evil megalomaniac villains. And so basically, I wanted to tease out, whether or not that's true. And as Adrian is one of our leaders, effectively as a leader of one of the communities, I wanted to start off by saying, Adrian, tell us about yourself. Are you really Mr. Burns in disguise? Because there is a passing resemblance.
Yeah, so I need to ask you a question first. You changed this from lunch and learn to an intelligence update. Is this the first intelligence update?
Well, it was the first time I could get a really intelligent guest, Adrian. So
I was going to opine that bringing a politician on for an intelligence update, is an interesting path to take.
I like interesting paths. I think
there you are. So Neil, we were talking. I was going to call you Mr. Alexander, seeing as you're not addressing me as His Worship Mayor Foster.
I'd have to tell you off, Adrian, because I'm a doctor.
Oh, well, there we are. And for all of the folks that are watching this, Neil and I have known each other. I don't think we want to count the number of years on that. But, in terms of leadership on the nuclear file, and you bring up, the anti-nuke movement, while everyone is describing the current environment as a nuclear renaissance, some of the messaging is finally getting out beyond the benefits and perhaps worrying about the things that we should actually worry about instead of many of the myths that we learned watching horror films and science fiction films in the 50s. I can tell you that I was first elected to office in 2003, and in every successive campaign, I have campaigned on a pro-nuclear stance. So, we need to listen to, and we need to worry about, and we need to address the anti-nuke. But you frequently hear about a silent majority. Certainly in Clarington, the silent majority, I would suggest, is not particularly concerned about the nuclear industry.
So, and that doesn't surprise me, because the nuclear industry doesn't cause a great deal of concern. So the people that are sitting there close to it get to see exactly what's going on, I imagine.
Well, so I think a couple of things happen, and one, you're right, it's a fairly quiet spot down there. The other, and I've got to give credit to the industry, particularly to the operators. So in Clarington's case, a significant number of people work at the plant. The folks at OPG are very frequently the absolute best ambassadors for the industry. So they work in the plant, they live here, their house is close to the plant, as is mine. I'm a 5-minute drive away, and I'm a glutton for punishment or something. I don't know what it is. Before we moved to Clarington, which is where Darlington is located, I lived maybe 10 minutes away from the Pickering nuclear power station on that. So, they're not loud creatures. They're, down back and away. And, I'm going to suggest that the engagement of the industry with the public, the ability to reach out, get questions answered, it's just not a whole lot of angst.
No, and that's good. So, I think one of the things I'm quite interested in is, what are they like as a corporate neighbor? So how do you get on with the people in the nuclear industry, and what do they mean for the region? And it might help, Adrian, because I think a lot of people may not know, how big Clarington actually is and what it encompasses. So you might want to paint a picture of Clarington before you launch into, what it means to the region.
Sure. So Clarington is the easternmost part of the Greater Toronto Area. So as we were laughing that my tagline is that when the sun rises in the east to greet the Greater Toronto Area, it gently kisses Clarington first. And it does, depending on the time of year. We get sunshine 4 minutes before Toronto does. And we're about 75 kilometers, my office, from downtown Toronto. Clarington is part of Durham region, so the region is the eastern boundary of the Greater Toronto Area. Clarington, a mixed rural urban community, so we call ourselves a community of communities. We may well be the fastest growing community in Canada. So Durham is the fastest growing in Ontario. Clarington is the fastest growing in Durham. So the number of folks that are moving in, I'm going to say house prices are reasonable, whatever that means in Ontario these days. I'm not sure that they are in fact reasonable with that. So, it's an interesting spot, and a lot of the folks watching will know that the Pickering plant is about 20 minutes down the road from us as well. And now that I've given you the background, I've completely forgotten the question that you asked me.
Well, it's really to talk about having a big nuclear plant.
Yes, and the industry.
And what it means to you as the mayor of the region, and to the people of the region to have the nuclear plant there.
So there is there's a very distinct dichotomy in the industry for nuclear hosts, and I would suggest, based on some exposure that I've had to some of our global partners, it's not an unusual dichotomy. OPG is, of course, the largest employer in Clarington, particularly with the refurbishment and the planned SMRs coming on. To put things in perspective, in a little corner in Clarington, there is about $100 billion being added to Canada's GDP. So, a significant amount of money being spent. OPG as a corporate citizen does, as they should and must, a huge amount of outreach. I've mentioned how important the employees are. They show up at events, they contribute and donate. They are front and center. I would suggest that the nuclear industry, the nuclear supply chain, very frequently is absent from the dialogue, and is absent in terms of getting directly engaged in the industry. And I can tell you that mayors of host communities in Europe and the US will make the same observation. But head offices tend to be to the west end of Toronto, not the east end. So if you look at Mississauga, Oakville, Cambridge, that's where the supply chain lives. The reactors live here.
So, that kind of introduces us into the Canadian Association of Nuclear Host Communities, because that is one of the issues that I think you deal with. And I wonder whether you'd like to talk about what the association is and some of its activities. And indeed, because I think you introduced that here as well, how it's working internationally with other partners to further its objectives.
Yeah, so CANAC, Canadian Association of Nuclear Host Communities, is exactly what the title suggests. For communities that host nuclear facilities, or for communities that might host, we have two different membership levels. Ignace, as an example, as an affiliate member, they may host the Deep Geological Repository. I suspect we'll be talking about that a little bit later. We've got a couple of communities in Saskatchewan that are interested in hosting small modular reactors, so they are affiliate members. And then you've got communities such as Kincardine, Clarington, Pickering, and several others, Fundy Shores, which is Point Lepreau, where we are host communities. We've been around since, I believe, around 2000. The association was a great excuse for us to get together at the CNA conference, the annual conference in Ottawa, share some ideas, share some thoughts. In the last couple of years, we have bumped up the activity of CANAC significantly. So CANAC is taking a role with NWMO. We are trying to provide, where we can, our experiences as host communities to potential host communities. So, I will never tell a potential host community what they should or shouldn't do, but I can bring my lived experience. And we can bring lived experience from a variety of communities that have exposure to the nuclear industry in different ways on that. So we're dealing with NWMO saying what help, if any, we can do with the DGR, recognizing that as much as we're focused on the end recipient of those fuel bundles, and ultimately with their increased mandate, nuclear waste, we are the current host communities of that. We are working with the CNSC in terms of trying to help and get information out. Again, we have a degree of expertise in terms of what it is like to live with the nuclear industry right here, a facility, on that. And will, for your members, and they may or may not know that the CNSC participant funding, when a licensing hearing comes forward, is not available to municipalities, which is very frustrating because we don't have the expertise on staff to comment appropriately, on these hearings. CANAC, as a non-for-profit, can apply for that funding, and we will hire experts. And this is a minor plug for folks who might be experts that, send us your name and we may reach out, but we will hire experts to help communities to navigate some of the questions. Very frequently, we don't even know what the right questions are. And then again, very active on the SMR file for a variety of reasons. And more recently, we were invited the year before last, and again a few weeks ago, to Vienna to the IAEA. There we met an American group, the Energy Community Alliance, a European group, GMF, which are they're the same groups that we are, and have created a global partnership. I can tell you that the Director General, we had a great long conversation with the Director General, thought we were, my words, not his. He's far too polite to state it this way. Thought that a group coming out of Europe and North America was sort of full of themselves to suggest we were global. But we're given marching orders that if we can help, some of the emerging nations that are interested. So a lot of African nations at that conference. There are some groups out of Asia as well. He's from Argentina, so would like to see South Central America, and we'll be delighted to help in any way that we can. So we went from sharing cups of tea and ideas to working with NWMO, CNSC, and we'll see how the whole IAEA thing moves ahead.
Excellent. And
how was that for a quick synopsis?
well, no, I think that was brilliant, except for the bit where you advertised for other consultants, where I wish you hadn't done that, because I'm just trying to make sure that there's only one name in your mind when that sort of work comes up.
It's
I think
true.
One of the things I find fascinating is that I think a lot of people that have never lived in a nuclear community would have thought that the role of the Canadian Association of Nuclear Host Communities would be to complain about the nuclear industry, because all of those other people have heard such dreadful things about how horrible it must be. And yet you seem to be implying that every single member is actually lobbying for more nuclear. Are there some that are going, we don't like it, and they're part of it? Or is it just that as soon as you understand what you're dealing with, you grow to like it?
So we tend to be very supportive, but trust me, we complain. So part of the point of the Association of Nuclear Host Communities and a frustration, as I've noticed with the supply chain, is without willing host communities, the nuclear industry does not exist. And there is globally, as well as within our association, a frequent frustration that we seem to be taken for granted. If you can engage local business, not hire them, engage them, give an opportunity. So I've got, with the refurbishment, just short of $13 billion being spent in my backyard, and the vast bulk of that money is going to the west end of the city. So I appreciate it and I like it, but it would be good if you could show us some love. We do have concerns that that come out of some of the CNSC hearings. Everything isn't, and it would be horrible if it was perfect. We do learn from each other. We've recently had a study done on nuclear host community agreements, and we're trying to look at what a fair and level playing field may be for expansions or new projects coming to town. As you might imagine, that's a dog's breakfast, because each agreement has been written at a specific point in time in a specific community for a specific project. So trying to find some sort of uniform basis has been a challenge, but we've got that document. We're just ready to release that to the members at this point in time. but by and large, we understand how important it is, how important it is for job creation. We take pride in in Ontario, the amount of electricity we're providing, stable, affordable. I'm going to say carbon free. I know you can argue that near carbon free electricity from our little spot to 20% of the people in Ontario. And then you get into the the whole isotope thing. So host communities are generally really proud of what they're contributing.
And you're in an interesting situation of already being a host community, but potentially being the host to one of the first small modular reactor projects anywhere in the world. I'm wondering what that's going to mean to the region, and what problems you see developing and what opportunities it's going to create for the region.
So we're working through. So the bounding exercise was just done, and some minor changes in terms of the expected CANDU reactors, the ones that were canceled in 2012. So I'll go back to some scars heal more slowly than others. But I actually read about that. I was mayor then. I read about that in the newspaper about a week and a half after the premier had been out telling us that they were gung ho 100%, going to build those reactors here. So you're always worried about that, and certainly the NuScale announcement out of the U.S. causes a degree of consternation. We will be watching very closely as we are the birthplace of, I'm going to call it a new technology. I know that it's a variation on existing technology, but this is a new business that has the potential of billions of dollars of global economic benefit. And again, as a host community, we want to make sure that we participate in some of those benefits that come our way. Neil, as you well know, the number of employees, the construction costs of those 4 SMRs is nowhere near what 4,800 megawatts of CANDU would have brought. So again, we're watching that and somewhat concerned. On the other hand, we've had the Polish delegation, and the Poles have signed an MOU. We had a group of Swedes in town taking a look. Estonia, I'm not sure if I got it right. There's another MOU there. Jeff Lyash, who was the former president of OPG, now at the TVA, they are working closely, and I know the TVA is taking a look at at the GE Hitachi. Well, I think more than taking a look at the GE Hitachi. So on our doorstep, particularly given how far advanced things are with that design, there is the potential for billions of dollars, and the birthplace is right here. It's exciting.
I think so too, and I think one of the things that interests me is that by being there really early, we get the opportunity not just for the economic benefit for our own projects, but for some share of all of the future projects.
Sorry.
Well, I was just going to add, because you made a very good point there about people coming to visit, that people often look at the economic benefit just as the manufacturing. And I go, hang on, there's a whole load of other stuff that goes on. So you're doing the public relations stuff of people coming and visiting. That's economic benefit. The people that do the geotechnical engineering, they will be in demand around the world because they will have done it before. All of those soft skills also will come into demand, and they can be located in the region, perhaps much easier than moving a manufacturing site. So I expect you'll see the benefit from all of those as well.
Oh, absolutely. Even if we look at the college university, the skilled trades, for folks coming in, if you look at the deal that was just signed with Romania, the support that they are going to need and the ability for any number of sectors in the Canadian economy to support. and then beyond the economic side of this, I opened my inbox and I had something from the Ontario Clean Air Alliance, and they're complaining about Napanee taking a gas-fired plant. And of course that's a terrible thing, but nuclear is a terrible thing. We know renewables aren't going to do it. If we want to control our energy supply, I'm not sure if a big extension cord to Quebec is a good way of doing that or not. So we're providing solutions, and then you go a little bit further down the road. Is there the potential to, and I know I'm going to say something that'll probably get me in trouble, but as we replace coal plants, can we decarbonize as much as possible the oil sands with these? So the reactors here are 300 megawatts, which are a really good size for replacing coal plants. When you take a look at what they're looking up in Deep River, the micro reactor, the ability to stop burning millions of liters of diesel in the Arctic, the most fragile ecosystem. And we all read the stories where water had to be flown in. Can you imagine what the cost of flying water in was because of the contamination of their water supply? So it's exciting stuff.
It is, and you touched a nerve there with your mention of the Ontario Clean Air Alliance, because you and I were both involved at the time in, the original proposals to build nuclear reactors at Darlington, and the Ontario Clean Air Alliance were lobbying against it, mainly supported by gas money and promoting gas as an alternative. Now they're against gas, but we're having to build gas because we didn't build those reactors 10 years ago when we should have done. And had we done that, we wouldn't be building gas plants. So they are the cause of their own problem. And I get a little frustrated that people continue to listen to them when actually they just blunder from one environmental disaster to another.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because now your email box will be filled instead of mine. So
I have, I keep my email box quite secure.
But no, I mean, you can figure in 12, if they'd done that, we would probably be cutting a ribbon, or be very close to cutting a ribbon on 4,800 megawatts of new supply today.
We would indeed. And if you had listened to some of my presentations at the time, I predicted exactly what's happening today 10 years ago and told them that it would happen, and was told that it couldn't happen, the market would sort it out. And I said, no, it won't. So
Neil, this is therapy. I mean, if you look at the charts that were provided, then it showed the supply coming. I mean, I remember turning a page and going, okay, you're telling me that this is going to be fine, and your own data is showing a divergence between demand and supply. Anyway, thank you for the therapy, Dr. Alexander.
I struggle with some of these predictions, because we know ultimately electricity demand is going to increase because we love electricity. It is just such an incredibly valuable product, and we can't decarbonize until we have electricity. So we've got to put the horse before the cart and get the electricity in place. And so let's get on with those projects up in Darlington and get them moving.
Indeed.
I have had a question about basically public relations and what support there is for getting out there and talking about the nuclear issues. Not sure, how much does the region do it? How much does OPG do it? What is the sort of discussions that are taking place that keep people informed about what's going on?
So I would suggest that OPG or Bruce, they carry the water on that. They've got the budgets, the staff, and the expertise to get out. Neil, you've heard me chew on this bone, or watch me chew on this bone for years and years. We we seem to be aligning the message. One, if we want to deal with climate change, nuclear has to be part of the mix. It's not the solution, but it's part of the solution. Renewables are part of the solution, but are not the whole solution. For years, there was no discussion or dialogue around medical isotopes. And you talk to the number of people whose lives or lives of friends and family have been beneficially changed through nuclear medicine, or who don't know their lives have been changed by virtue of the fact that they're not picking up bugs when they go to the dentist, and will ignore all of the industrial applications of those isotopes. We are finally getting message out. But if somehow we could align some key messaging from the operators and the nuclear industry, take 5 or 10% of the budget, identify what those common themes were, I think we could make huge strides. And now I'm a politician, I get to talk out of the other side of my mouth on that. Given some of the polling and acceptance of nuclear and recognition of climate change, and again, maybe the population is aging enough that we've gotten over those 1950s movies. We are seeing a significant shift in acceptance of the technology.
Yeah, great. And if I could add, the Canadian Nuclear Society now has a communication program, and it helps answer the question of the person that asked it here from I think Birch Hills County. Then the Canadian Nuclear Society is trying to help in engagement and providing information about nuclear. So do reach out to me, and we will do what we can to help as well. So there is OPG and Bruce Power and people like that are very active. There is ourselves. There is North American Young Generation in Nuclear that are very active in communicating with people, and Women in Nuclear for the female perspective on what's going on as well. So there are a number of organizations you can reach out to, and I'm sure all of them would be providing as much help as they can.
So Neil, an interesting observation, and you point out all the channels, and we are all aware of all of the channels. But maybe we can. I've got Jen in the office here. I wonder if we could task OPG with the communications channels when there's a press release, for example. The partnership that we created in Vienna, the work that we did a few weeks ago in Vienna, to get those press releases out and share them across all of these different channels would be, a really quick, easy way of promoting that message.
So you speak to something very dear to my heart, and that is that one of the nuclear industry's challenges is its communicators don't communicate with each other. And it's something that I have observed, having come to communication quite late in life, and observed that everything in the technical side depends on operating experience, OPEX, and yet we never actually analyze our communications and learn from our mistakes. So I'm glad you raised that, and it's my opportunity to kind of throw in there and say that there's some work to be done, I think. Really good question coming up next, which I was actually formulating in my mind before it came up, but I'll put it to you directly, because that way I can throw the blame onto somebody else. But can you talk about the negative effects of being a nuclear host community? So are the things that worry you? Are the things that are a nuisance to you? What things would you like to see improved because you're uncomfortable with them?
So I won't suggest that I have discomfort, but certainly in the back of your mind, we have a nuclear power plant, and while the likelihood of something going wrong is exceptionally remote, any mayor of a nuclear host community would be foolish not to look at what has happened, and Fukushima particularly, and we were laughing about this, saying the likelihood of a tsunami is sort of kind of remote. And I'm saying that tongue in cheek on Lake Ontario. In the event of something going on, what is the reaction? Do we have a handle on things? So I can tell you, I've spent as much time as I could, not as much as I want, taking a look at the local reaction to Fukushima. I'll make the numbers up, I forget. But apparently the form that you needed to fill out if you were a property owner was something like 144 pages long before the government got at it to fix it. So it's, fundamental small things like this. What have we learned, and whether it's something big or something small. The false alarm in Pickering and the amount of time that it took for that to be rectified, that was so massively frustrating for us. So I got a call. I was, happened to be in front of my computer early on a Sunday morning. What did I do? I called my good friend Dave Ryan, who was the mayor of Pickering. Within 4.5 minutes, I knew that there wasn't anything going on. And then the communications got completely messed up. So we knew in Clarington that there wasn't an emergency. My comms team were going absolutely insane because it wasn't our story to release. So you're watching this thing unfold, knowing that we could help stop this thing unfolding. Like, folks, everything is fine. But it wasn't our story, nor did we have any authority to tell the story, despite knowing. And Pickering, it would have been worse for the comms teams in Pickering, right, for that. So is it an additional worry? Yes, absolutely. Is there a degree of stigma, amongst some? And I think, again, that is diminishing. Yeah, there is. I've got a big, huge chunk of property on the waterfront that is never going to be publicly accessible. If I'm hearing that another refurb is doable, and the SMRs, the best guess is maybe 60, 65 years of life down there. And then on planning and all good rules, I've got a 3-kilometer exclusionary zone, which limits stuff that we can put down there. And I would put those in the category of annoyances. There is absolutely additional responsibility on staff and on the elected reps hosting a community, hosting a nuclear facility.
And one of the things that people outside of the nuclear industry consider to be a huge problem is the used fuel. And as you pointed out, you have within your region a large proportion of the used fuel that's ever been created in the country. Does that cause you any problems?
No, no. Quite frankly. So anyone that's been down knows how it's being stored temporarily. The way that is managed and contained. And the other is, I think more broadly for the public. So here's a frustration that maybe I skipped over and didn't think about is the lack of education. You will hear people say they're not worried about the power plant because if something happens, they're going to be gone in a flash anyway. There'll be a mushroom cloud, a blinding light, and you explain to people that, no, that is not what happened. In the event of something going wrong, it's likely to be a very slow rolling, chain of events with time to get in. But another side, and you'll hear that NWMO has gotten through to me, finally, is we don't have a problem with the used fuel. The DGR, the solutions exist. It's a solution that is recognized worldwide as a solution that'll work. If people could get down to the demonstration site in Oakville and understand the depth of engineering that they are doing, the foresight, see what the Finns in particular, where they're going, work going on around the world. So we'll see what happens. I guess it's in 24 that NWMO hopes to have chosen a site, Ignace or South Bruce. For that, we'll see how all of that works out. But there's a solution there.
But to ask the really difficult question that these people would put. So again, I'm divorcing myself from this question somewhat. They would say, you produced it, you should keep it. Why aren't you building a DGR in Clarington?
So Clarington was looked, and the geological structure doesn't make sense for a DGR in Clarington. So that's the very easy answer. I mean, some people are suggesting that the DGR should be in Saskatchewan because the uranium came from Saskatchewan. And you can argue it in many different ways. Honestly, based on what I know of the DGR, would I hesitate to live in a community with a DGR that was properly sited, particularly in Canada? Talking with one of the geologists at NWMO, he was laughing, said, we're talking with our Japanese friends who are trying to site a DGR, and one of the questions that the Japanese said is, "What are you guys doing about volcanoes?" And they said, "Well, not an issue, but in Japan, an issue." And the Swiss are saying, well, what are you doing, about the shift? Like the DGR could be on the top of a mountain. And of course, they've identified sites where that's not going to happen. And in Canada, with the shield, it's almost too easy doing it. So you take a look at the challenges in other spots of the world. But I thought the volcano bit was hilarious.
And that one kind of answers itself because it would create its own containment. But that's getting into a degree of complexity that we probably don't want to go to. I think, you lapsed into the engineering response, which is a good one. People should go and see what they're doing. I actually think there's a geological response. People need to go and look at the rock because they use lived experience and they think buried in soil because that's their lived experience. And they don't appreciate that it's 600 meters of solid stuff that looks like your kitchen surface if you're a wealthy person, rather than soil. Right.
One of the geologists, I thought it was a brilliant answer, where they're concerned how many kilometers away from a body of water, for example, they are. And the geologist's answer is, you're using the wrong measurement. And I'll make up the number. It's not 5 kilometers. It's 10 million years, which again I thought was we were worried about the wrong stuff, which doesn't mean that there aren't things that we shouldn't worry about, but we need to be focused on the right metrics.
That's an excellent response, and I will be using that in future. I have pointed out to people that distance isn't relevant anyway, because if I put my coffee to 10 feet above my computer, it's more dangerous to my computer than it is if it's 2 inches below it.
Yes, right? Correct. That's pretty good.
There's a lot of nonsense spoken about it, but that's great to have clarification there that you actually put the region forward because you're comfortable with being the final site. But then NWMO said we're actually not. It's not an appropriate place to be putting it. We're going to select somewhere that is much more secure. So
to be fair, I can't suggest. So that work was done many years ago. Right. So that was before my time. I can take no credit. But again, would I
realized there was a before your time?
Yeah. But no, if it were in South Bruce, if it were in Ignace, Ignace, the winters might bother me a little bit. But I would not hesitate, to live there. I mean, if you think about it, I'm quite comfortable, being beside an operating power plant, as opposed to a repository.
When you understand that context, you just wonder what all the fuss is about. I want to move on a little bit because we could talk about repositories endlessly.
Yeah, we were worried about filling an hour, right?
And I actually wouldn't need you to talk about repositories for an hour. I could do that quite comfortably with any just blank piece of paper in front of me. But we've had a number of questions about medical isotopes, and you touched on them. Is there going to be an opportunity for the region to get into the medical isotope business more, either with the refurbishment of Darlington or with the new SMRs that are being built? Is that going to create new opportunities for you?
So part of the refurbishment of Darlington does in fact include, I think it's Molly, that is coming out that wasn't coming out before. Some expanded capacity there. And you're talking with a politician, not a scientist. Here on the isotopes. But I keep hearing about isotopes. I shouldn't say I keep hearing, but you hear about isotopes that were very difficult bits of waste that are now worth their weight in gold, or multiples of their weight in gold. So as both medical and industrial uses move forward, I think we would see an expansion. Probably of the CANDUs. I'm not sure that BWRs are as suited as, and I see Ron Oberth. I can't forget cobalt or tritium. That's already coming out of Darlington as well. I don't know if the BWRs are as amenable to producing isotopes or not, and that's just ignorance, frankly, on my part.
Right, but it's certainly something that the region has a track record of, with some of the stuff that's already happened at Darlington. Something you would be more than happy to host if the opportunity arose.
So we were thrilled to hear that was part of the refurb, expanding that. And again, if you want to talk about being a proud host community, in something as Canadians, we don't talk about ourselves, but as supplying the globe with life-saving isotopes, that's something that we need to be immensely proud of. And I would bet if you asked 100 people in Toronto off the street, they wouldn't have a clue. And that's only expanding.
No, and I think the industry has done a tremendous job in recent years of making people appreciate that the value that is contributing. So we were undoubtedly world leaders in technetium, the molybdenum that's used to produce technetium. We lost that with NIU, the CNL reactor. It's coming back as we look at other ways of producing it, and that's very exciting. We're still down at McMaster, world leaders in iodine production, and there is something just being created, the Canadian Medical Isotope Ecosystem, which I suggest you have a chat with, that is looking at trying to reestablish Canada as #1 in the world. I think we kind of lost that in our own minds, and that ecosystem is trying to bring that back and establish Canada as the place to be if you want to get into isotopes. So that's a very exciting development for us as well.
Absolutely. Yes.
So I'm just checking that we're covering off all the things. So I think we're heading towards the end, Adrian. So, and I think we've kind of answered this. But if you had to talk to, let's say you're having coffee with the mayor of another community that is contemplating hosting a small modular reactor, say, because that's the most likely scenario, and they said to you, what's your advice? What would you say to them?
Well, so there are a couple of things as we can share, again, our lived experience. And Clarington's sort of interesting in that we've gone through the Darlington build. I'm going to say it doesn't feel like 30 years ago. We're going through the refurbishment right now. We've got the SMRs coming up. We've got a very successful, the Port Granby low-level waste, which has just been done. And again, in a world where the industry doesn't say, look how fantastic we are, Port Granby was was a huge success. I think the message, as I've mentioned, is pick your spot. What are you really worried about? Are you worried that there's going to be a blinding flash of light? Well, that's a false concern. What are the issues? We would, and I'll plug CANAC here for any communities that are looking. Particularly the smaller communities don't necessarily have the money or the expertise to get the advice that they need. Well, we can help with that through the CNSC and the participant funding that is available on that. I can tell you that South Bruce is worried about a DGR, because of an increase in property values and all kinds of high-paying jobs, which sounds ridiculous. But you know what? If you own a mom and pop store, and we see it in Clarington to a degree, you're now competing. So wealth creation can actually become a challenge that you want to get in front of, and something again that that we would share on both sides. Something. What is it? Careful what you ask for and what you wish for, right? On that. So I think the advice would be, come up with questions, be open to reasonable answers to the questions. So I recently ran into a counselor who ran on an anti-nuclear platform, was at the CNS conference in Niagara Falls, and was figuring out how he was going to slowly and easily back down because the information that he got, factual information, has turned him from anti-nuke to being a supporter.
That again, learning seems to do that. There is a very good question here that you haven't touched on, about whether this. You talked a little bit about stigma, and I wanted to pick up on that in general as to whether it had any noticeable consequences having that stigma. But this one specifically raises, did your agricultural industry in the region, does that suffer as a result of being associated with the nuclear plant?
Hard for me to answer because I'm not directly involved. We have an agricultural advisory committee, and of course I know many of the farmers, and I'm going to suggest no. But again, I don't live it. Neil, you'll recall, and anyone who wants to do a Google map of the power plant, so Google Darlington Nuclear, and you will see fields right around the power, in very close proximity to the power plant. I'm guessing those fields are still planted and producing because they can sell their stuff. Otherwise, they wouldn't be planted and producing. But I suppose, and in my mind, this is more political than anything else. You looked at some of the actions that were taken, as a result of the Japanese releasing, I'm going to call it contaminated water. That's maybe, I guess it's factually correct, but I think most of the world saw that was political, not not an actual health concern for anyone. But we don't see it. I'm convinced that if you put a sticker on something that said growing within 5 kilometers of a nuclear power plant, that some people would opt to buy the apple beside it instead of that one. I don't know that for a fact, but it's probably not too far from the truth.
I have a theory it might be the opposite. And one of the things I tell people is that it's not the nuclear industry that's the problem, it's the scaremongering.
Yes.
Why don't you stop the scaremongering? Because I know from a while ago that I think Chapman's, the ice cream producers, buy their milk up from around Bruce, and they were saying, if you build a DGR, then we won't be able to sell as much ice cream. And I'm going, well, you've already got the largest nuclear station in the world.
Right.
I don't think a DGR is going to make any difference. And
No.
if it hasn't made a difference so far, it's not going to make a difference into the future. And my suggestion for NWMO was they went and sponsored Chapman's to have nuclear ice cream, the pistachio, I thought, because that panders to everyone's belief, with a panel on the side that explains that, whatever. And I bet they could sell it worldwide.
I'm thinking
People would go and sell it, would go and buy it everywhere in the world if they did that.
jalapeno flavored ice cream. It's a little bit hot.
Yeah, that
Yeah, I mean we're making light. It's a serious issue. But again, you know, we talked about communications and what advice I might give colleagues. It's educate yourself.
yeah. But I think we can agree it's talking about it that is the problem, not the actual consequence of it.
Yes,
So,
yes.
so that's good. I had another that I wanted to come back to, and oh yeah, we talked about used fuel and the fact that you're not a suitable place for it. There are a number of communities en route between you and wherever it does finally get disposed of, and they're obviously concerned about the transport. Now, we don't know what communities that will be involved, but we do know that it will be transported through your community. Have you been looking at that? And does the fact that now we're doing something different and sticking it on a road and moving it cause the region any concern?
So Neil, if I could reach through and give you a hug, I would do that right now. I don't know if any of
Please don't, Adrian.
any of the folks from NWMO are on, but it was a point that was brought up that as much as there is a concern for the community accepting the waste, there are a bunch of communities that have the waste and the used fuel bundles already. So we don't know where it's going. We don't necessarily know how it's going to be transported or where it's going to be transported. There is a great deal of discussion and dialogue going on right now, knowing that there will be issues, tons of communication that has to be had with those communities, including, what if? And Neil, I know you've seen, I'm sure you've seen the video of the train. This was a British video, the train crashing into the container. So, I'm going to wreck this video for anyone that hasn't seen it. Didn't work out well for the train, the containment system. And I laugh every time. I'll age myself. If you remember the Adams family and Gomez Adams and his trains and blowing up, every time I see that video, I laugh. I probably shouldn't. But again, it's, there are thousands of bits of radioactive material that are transported annually across the globe in Canada. And again, it's educate yourself in terms of what are the safety protocols, what's the experience, what should you really be worried about as opposed to what you are possibly worried about on that. So a great deal of thought and dialogue is happening right now on that. And I've got to give credit again to my friends at NWMO. We're a number of years away before stuff starts being shipped, but they're in front of that issue now.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent answer, Adrian. And I think, one of the things people don't appreciate, because Canada hasn't been involved in the shipment of used fuel, where it may be apparent from my accent, I come from a country that was involved in that. We used to have a company that actually operated 3 ships that were dedicated to moving used fuel across the oceans. And they also owned 100 locomotives throughout the world for the movement of used fuel. So used fuel has been moving around the world for the last 50 years. And the reason why nobody in Canada knows that's happening is that it's never caused a problem to anybody. So why we suddenly think it's going to be a problem in Canada is slightly beyond me.
Well, we're running out of time, but a really important part, again, we talk about how simple it is, and I maybe minimize with that, with the shield, but we're dealing with used fuel and waste from reactors. We look at our friends south of the border, or in Great Britain, or other nations that are dealing with military waste. So again, the nature of stuff that we have to deal with. The word inconsequential, that's a bad word. But if we compare ourselves to what other nations are dealing with already, cutting up and dealing with used warships,
Right.
right?
I have so many stories about that, but we are out of time. Normally, Adrian, I would give my guest the opportunity to have the last word and to make a final comment, but we are clicking through the final seconds. I think you and I have just started. I have had a lot of fun. I hope everybody else has had both a lot of fun and learned from our discussion. If they want, they can hang on, because you and I can probably talk for another hour or so with useful stuff. But other than that, I would just like to say thank you very much for your time, Adrian. I hope everybody has enjoyed somebody with actual real life experience of what it's like to live in a nuclear community that does not come from the nuclear industry and is therefore simply providing the perspective from their region. I think it's been very valuable, and thank you very much, Adrian. Really appreciate your time.
Neil, thank you. It is always a pleasure. It truly is.
Okay, and with that, Laura, can we close the discussion?